Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. I am Gunnar Rios, and welcome to another episode of the Logical Gamers Logic Podcast. I'm here tonight with Mr. BlankaKong and Mr. Esoteric, and tonight's going to be a fun-filled topic full of pie graphs and charts, because we're back in high school and we're learning chemistry. No, but tonight's topic is going to be a pretty interesting one. I found this one on a pretty cool website called Game World Observer. If you've watched another one of our videos, you know that we've used it as a source in another video. So this one is going to be who are indie game buyers? Like, who's out here in the indie game space? And the interesting headline that kind of caused me to want to bring this up with the guys as a potential topic is that the typical indie gamer, according to this study, plays 14 to 18 hours per week, values innovation, prefers PC as their main source, and usually their buying habits range between $15 to $25 games. I found that interesting because that, minus the PC preference, yeah, that's kind of where I sit with the indie game space. So, I'll just kind of like, if you're at home, obviously we'll provide the article for you guys. If you want to kind of run through it, I'm gonna kind of run through the article. Kong and Esoteric will, kind of give their opinions on it, and we'll run through the article from top to bottom. So, the article starts with Phil Hoffman, product marketing at Humble Games. That's the website where you could buy like a bunch of bundles, usually humble bundle sales they call them. So you get like a bunch of games. That's how I ended up getting like all the Telltale games. Shared their research findings at the Game Developer Conference of 2023. So this is last year, kind of basically showing like who are indie gamers, what are their buying habits, what are they looking for when it comes to games. And some interesting bullet points that I'll start off with are regular indie buyers. They purchased 5 or more indie titles within the prior 12 months from when the study was run. And then we have light indie buyers who purchased 1 to 4 indie games within that 12-month period. And then traditional game buyers who've bought 0 indie titles but bought at least 1 AA or AAA game within the prior 12 months. Now, I found that interesting because if I'm going to rate myself according to these 3 characteristics, you know, I would consider myself a light indie game buyer. There are some periods where I'll buy more indie games than other periods, but usually at any given point, I'm buying between 1 to 2 indie games. So, I was pretty surprised that I would be considered a light indie game buyer, which is pretty much 40% of the focus group that was used for this study. So a pretty sizable number, and it kind of goes to show that what we keep talking about on this channel, where indie games are becoming more popular. Indie games tend to be a higher quality product, and they're even surpassing double and especially triple, or in our new glorious age, quadruple A games. So, just pass it off to whoever wants to pick it up. What would you be in this first graph? Are you a regular indie buyer, light, or are you a breaded traditional game buyer? Which I love that term. I'm going to start using it now. Instead of casual, I'm just going to call you a traditional game buyer.
I'm definitely a regular indie buyer.
Yeah, I figured you would be.
I definitely have bought +5 indie games last year. I bought a lot of indie. Um, Primarily because and I know they kind of box me in, you know, later in the article, but like just off the top of my head and based off reasons I buy these games, is that they represent design of a time that's behind us now, as far as video games are concerned.
Yeah.
So that aesthetic and that form definitely is more appealing to me than what is more modern. As well as the price points are pretty attractive. Whenever I see an indie game that I'm even like semi interested in, and I see that it's like $20 or $30, I'm like, all right, cool, easy. Like I don't even like bat an eye because it's such an attractive price point. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
buying, if you order something on Uber Eats, which I try not to do at all, but the few times that I have done, like that's an indie game right there. Like just buying a sandwich, drink, and maybe a side, and then you're spending like $30 on like all these extra fees, delivery fee, and all this other shit. So for me,
Yeah.
it's like shit. That's an indie game right there. Like that's a fucking Castlevania like game that I could have been playing. Damn it. Instead of just making a damn sandwich at home, which is what I do now. I just I try to make food at home. Um, but yeah, the price point, and then also the overall game design philosophy behind a lot of those games is what attracts me to them. So more Metrovania style games as well as platformers. That's my preferred corner of like the indie game space.
All right. What about you, Mr. Esoteric? Are you ain't no dirty traditional game buyer, ya?
Nah, I'm not. I mean, I do
He's
dabble
kind of
in
both, honestly.
the double A. Yeah, I'm pretty much a hybrid, but
Yeah.
I think honestly, from the traditional perspective, based upon what I do, in terms of streaming, I try to keep up and see what's enjoyable within that category that I would enjoy playing. It's kind of like a hit or miss in that regard. But I would say I would fall under mostly the regular indie buyer category because I've definitely double dipped. There's been due to the price point, there's been situations where I would acquire said indie game and then months later I realized that there's a physical copy because typically indie games don't, you know, um, launch with physical copies. So I'll be so eager to play said game because typically when you uh when you acquire any game, it has pretty much all the game mechanic ideologies as like BlankaKong mentioned with like I'm going to like expound on that in terms of like they remove all the fluff. There's not a lot of cinematics. It's mostly gameplay. It's straight to the point. Pretty much traditional gaming. What traditional games used to be for us growing up. That's what a traditional game would be. Um, so with that being said, I would acquire the digital copy, play that, and enjoy it so much that I want the physical copy because I'm more of a physical snob. I like to have my stuff and be able to maintain that. Um, and also the price point as Kong spoke about is not too bad because I'm pretty much buying the game for $30, but then the physical copy is like 30 to $35. So I'm pretty much paying less than what a AAA title is currently, which is $70 plus tax. So I'm pretty much getting more bang for my buck, even though it's kind of redundant because I'm buying the same thing. But I know definitively that me playing an indie title, I'm gonna have 90% more of a good time than a AAA title because AAA titles nowadays are kind of lackluster and they're sorely lacking in certain things, especially the gameplay portion. But yeah, pretty
No.
much to answer, I'd be a regular indie buyer as well.
All right, cool. So, some other interesting things. That I This article's chock full of interesting little things that kind of make a lot of sense when you put like numbers and math behind it. So I recommend you listening at home definitely check out this article. Like it's really interesting. So light indie buyers, according to this study, and traditional game buyers have a lot of overlap. So they'll play a lot of game or some of their favorite games would be shooters that take the number one spot, but people who lean more to the indie game side are more likely to play roguelikes, Metrovanias, card games, and interactive story titles, which is a category that traditional gamers who primarily play on console don't pay much attention to, which is kind of true. Like you don't really obviously there's an exception to every rule, but when somebody comes into a GameStop or a Best Buy, nobody's talking about like, yo, bro, you played that Symphony of the Night? You played that Hollow Live? They're talking about have you played the new God of War? Have you played Final Fantasy 16? Are you playing Final Fantasy 17? More mainstream kind of traditional games. And this one kind of gravitated towards me, but also not. So regular indie buyers stand out the most with their top genre being RPGs, which is 100% me. If it's an indie game and it's a turn-taking RPG, my ass is on it. The only difference in my personal part is I tend to not play on PC. I'll buy it digitally on something like the Nintendo Switch because I like the portability aspect of the Switch. I guess Steam Deck is now a thing, but I don't own a Steam Deck personally.
But I would
And
say that would be taken into account as a PC, maybe.
well, I think for the sake of this article, I think they mean specifically a
Desktop.
personal computer, like a desktop computer.
Okay. Okay.
Not yeah. So because they usually make a clear distinction between a console and a PC. So
Okay.
for the sake of that, yeah, they mean PC. But yeah, in the terms of the RPG aspect, I definitely yeah, that's me. Most RPGs that I have bought that kind of fit my personal taste in RPGs are more turn-taking RPGs have come from the indie space, not so much from the AAA, but some from the AA. So kind of fluctuates between the two. So another interesting one that I wanted to bring up before I pass it to you guys is both light and regular indie buyers tend to describe indie games, we kind of said it multiple times, as unique, experimental, innovative, and passionate, which is true on all accounts. Whereas more traditional game buyers, they're much more muted when they were asked to describe indie games, with some of them viewing these titles as lower quality products. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people when they look at an indie game that's maybe more pixel oriented or maybe is trying to emulate the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 or 3, their first words out of their mouth, yo, this game has some bad graphics. Why these graphics are so bad? And it's crazy to see that was also echoed in this study. And also echoed the fact that a lot of indie game buyers, they tend to cite the reason they buy these games because they're unique, experimental, innovative, and they're passionate, which I'll always say that about indie games. They tend to make passionate, well thought out, well planned out games because their budgets are natively smaller. They don't have millions of dollars to work with. They can't rely on 4K um, high definition graphics, so they have to make the most out of their small budgets, which tends to breed innovation in games, which used to be a thing. So, so like, what are you guys' thoughts on this? Because I found this like, wow, yeah, I've heard the terminology. This game's graphics suck. I've heard those exact words from people when describing certain indie games.
I've heard that a lot as well. I used to work at a game store and I would hear that all the time. Like I remember doing like guts, which we just us putting like new games on the wall, and people would sometimes you would get the what I call like the OG gamers. They would come in. These are older guys, and they would ask like, "What's new?" And I would go, "Oh yeah, we got these that just came in today, or this came in this week, or whatever." And there'd be a lot of indie games. There'd be weeks where it'd be like in between AAA games. Like AAA games drop every. Sometimes they overlap, but like I would say they anywhere from 2 to 3 AAA games every quarter, right? So every 3 months there'd be like 2 to 3 major releases, air quotes major releases. Sometimes less. Sometimes there would be like just one major release. And in between those major releases, there'd be a fucking plethora of fucking indie games that would come out on console, because we sold physical games there, and people would see like all these like indie games, like RPGs, these Metrovania style games, platformers, roguelikes, etc. They go, damn, what's all this like Super Nintendo shit? Like I don't, because they're looking for
Yeah.
that more modern experience, and so, yeah, that's these guys are traditional gamers. They're used to just buying you know, the Gears of War, the Halos, the Call of Duties. These are the guys who buy those games every year, and so sometimes they'll come out of their season looking for some big game experience like a God of War or Ghost of Tsushima, and unfortunately, sometimes that those games don't come out too often, and their offerings are indie games, and a lot of them don't like indie games at all. They see them as lesser, like this is some little kid shit. That's how
Yeah.
I see it, which I disagree with. I have. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely the indie buyer, but I also buy some AAA stuff. Like I'll be getting Dragon's Dogma 2 when that comes out, and I'll probably get Stellar Blade in April. It's probably it for this year. We'll see, but I definitely dabble in the bigger games. But I think there's just more value in indie games, and because the price point is so low, and it's just more affordable, it's easier to buy those games and consume that product. So
Yeah, I think that's a big thing because it's a lot easier to get into a $40 game, or as we'll talk about, the $25 or a $30 game, than it is like a $70 game. If you were one of those poor bastards that bought Suicide Squad on launch, bro, I feel bad for you, but you just wasted $70. So, price point's definitely a big thing.
yeah,
But what are your thoughts, Esoteric? Because I know you double dip a lot, so clearly, like you're digging that price
funny
point.
man. He buys a lot of
Oh,
collector's
so
editions too.
yeah, I definitely do. I am appreciative of some of these AAA titles. Because most of the collector's editions I did acquire are games that I know would actually be good, or games that has like nostalgia. Armor Core, I knew it was going to be good. From Software typically makes good games. I acquired that. Mortal Kombat, nostalgia. Final Fantasy, nostalgia. And Tekken was definitely like nostalgia and love for the game. All these games are pretty much like new and love and whatnot. Um, I don't know. I feel like the reason why indie titles or people kind of sway from them, or should I ask this? With indie titles, right? Do you feel like they're not getting as much love as they do simply because they're not getting the proper advertisement? Could that be a contributing factor as to why?
Maybe
Um,
I don't know if that's it. If it is a contributing factor, it's a very minute number. I'm sure. If it were to run the data,
mhm.
I think, and this data isn't talked about, which is a little disappointing because when I saw this article, I was pretty excited because I like this kind of stuff, like deep diving into like the math, all
Yeah,
the stats behind this kind of thing. But I was sad to see that they didn't separate or segregate it by age group. They do it by, I think it's 18 to
that's what I was gonna
45,
ask.
but they don't dive deeper into that. Like, what do guys 35 to 40 play versus guys who are 45 plus, or what do the 18 to 25-year-olds play more of? Right? Like, they didn't separate by age groups, which is unfortunate because my presumption, just based off my experience, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the regular indie buyers are older, and a lot of the traditional
Yeah,
game
Yeah, I'd
buyers are
say
probably
so.
young.
yeah. Um, that's one of the things I was definitely going to ask as well, because I felt like if they had a chart of, or some type of survey as to when did you start playing games, like what system did you first start on? Because I think that's also a factor as to why gamers pick and choose what titles they want. If I think if you played games from uh, PS2, maybe PS3 and up, then you're more than likely to kind of go to the AAA side of things. Whereas if you played PS1 and down, you're more like being pulled into the indie. Um,
I'd have
I,
to agree with that. Yeah, because granted, there are some people that are around our age or older who would who would make the argument, oh, these graphics suck. They look like, insert old system that they know of here. But yeah, I think that mostly comes from a lot of the younger, like 18, 19, 20s, because they just grew up on a different type of game. They've grown up on the high definition 8K HDR on type video games. Like, even Fortnite is a very stylized game, but it's a very modern game in terms of its
Yeah.
looks compared to, Tomb Raider. I don't think of that because of the Tomb Raider collection that's out. But
Yeah.
when we were playing Tomb Raider, Laura Croft got them triangle titties. But hey, that's what we had back in the day. But to answer your question, your initial question about are indies not getting enough press compared to AAA, I would say if you asked me that question in like the early to mid 2000s, I would agree with you. But now, I think indies get just as much promotion as your AAAs because social media is a thing. Everybody has access to it. So if you're an indie developer, it takes nothing for you to make an official account on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, TikTok, all that stuff, and just like promote your game that way. And even now, your big console developers, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft, they even have their own indie spotlights. I know Nintendo does that a lot, where they
Yeah,
have like a whole spotlight dedicated to indie games. And I mean, what other type of publicity other than a Super Bowl advertisement are you looking for if you're trying to advertise your indie game? So I think nowadays indies are in a prime spot where, the big three, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, and four, and Valve, they recognize indie games are a real moneymaker. They're like people are regular indie game buyers. They're out there, so they get a lot more press now than back then. Back then, it was just like if you're not on the cover of PSN Monthly or Game Informer, ain't nobody gonna hear about your game unless they walk into a store.
or commercials, because commercials. Well, I don't know about now because like I use stream services, so I don't have cable or regular TV. So back then, commercials were pretty like dominant when it came to like swaying people into purchasing
Oh yeah, we
games.
always talk about the crazy ass '90s commercials where, like, these companies were basically just shit talking on live television. So yeah, it used to be wild back then. So kind of near the end of the article, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. This one was pretty cool. So I'll read these couple bullet points, and then you guys can like give me your thoughts on them. We kind of hit on this one already. When it comes to monetization for most of these groups, 50% of traditional gamers and 71% of regular indie buyers prefer full paid premium games. I'm talking about your 65s and your $70 game. And they also don't mind free to play with cosmetic only microtransactions. Whereas indie gamers are less likely to purchase a game at launch, preferring to wait a few months of release or when the title goes on sale. And the article says it's also worth noting that very few players pre-order. These are the indie gamers. 10% of light indie players pre-order, and 11% of traditional game buyers, and 12% of regular indie buyers. So like pre-order is kind of low across the board, which is pretty interesting because I figured more traditional game buyers were like pre-order on site. Turns out not so much. And according to Hoffman, one of the reasons the indie gamers are less likely to purchase a game at release is that they tend to play multiple titles at once and have stuff in their backlog. Bruh, I have stuff in my backlog from the fucking 3DS. So yeah, I get that. So they're okay to wait. It's like, bruh, I don't have to get this at $50 or $60. I'll wait. I got like 20 games to play. And and the second reason comes down to price sensitivity, which a lot of games aren't worth $70, let's be honest. And the last bullet point is Hoffman explained when we talk about if there's a sweet spot for pricing your game, certainly there are exceptions, but we did see between $15 and $25 was kind of a sweet spot. When you go below there, there'd be questions about the quality of the game. And when you go above 25, we do see a little bit more of a focus on content. And according to the study, when you go above $25, you're starting to compete with some of those double and triple A titles. So the expectations around the amount of content will go up as the price point goes up. So, from personal kind of experience, when a game is $30, which is that $5 increase from that sweet spot, I kind of do think that. So, when I first played Hollow Knight, I bought it at $30. I'm like, all right, this is a Metroidvania, so that I kind of know what to expect from this game. And, once I got through Hollow Knight and its expansion, I was like, all right, this game is worth the $30.
Mm-hmm.
Same with RPGs like Chain of Echoes. That was a $30 RPG, but it was packed full of content. So I don't know. It's just very interesting because I kind of like think about this stuff when I do buy my indie games. Yeah, that $5 price difference. I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, what do you got to offer me? Because I don't necessarily want to buy a deck builder or a roguelike for $30. I know there are some exceptions, like Hades is a roguelike that is more than $30, but that game, the art style is top notch,
And
the
Returnal.
gameplay. Yeah, and Returnal, that's a full $70, right, when it first came out? Because I know you bought it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
didn't buy it when it came out, but I did. I got it around the price point of like the $30 to $40 range.
yeah, okay, so yeah. So based on these bullet points, kind of like, what are you guys' opinions, thoughts, and concerns about it? Because I just threw a lot of numbers at you guys, but I don't know. For me personally, yeah, kind of. I didn't really think about that $5 price difference until I read this and really sat down and thought about it. It's like, yeah, that $5 does mean something. Crazy. It's just five
So
dollars.
there's a few things to note here. I'll start if that's okay, Esoteric.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
So first thing is, where was it? Sorry. Trying to
no,
find
man. We do it live. It's not wrong.
interesting point where he talks about like the amount of time that these guys we kind of skipped over it, and it kind of ties into this part down here, how like the pricing and the amount of games that they buy versus the amount of time that is actually played, right? So, um, was it this?
Well, regular indie buyers are the most active players of the three groups. Average playtime of 18.3 hours per
That's a
week.
part of it, yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, I'll find it. Anyway, so when it comes to monetization, most players in all groups, 58% of traditional and 71% of regular indie buyers prefer full paid premium games. They also don't mind free to play with cosmetic only transactions. And uh, if you go up, um, within the prior 12 months, and this is the people that they surveyed, right? So like these numbers are going to vary. Um, Group of gamers, this group of gamers bought an average of 14 indie games, 7 AAA, 7 AA, and 7 AAA, which lines up with me. Like I buy a lot of indie games and then like a handful of like AAA games. Like last year, I can
mhm.
name them off the top of my head. Like I can't name all the indie games I bought because I bought a lot, but I could tell you I bought RE4 remake, Armor Core 6. I bought Lies of P.
Street
I
Fighter
bought Street Fighter
Six.
6, and I bought something in December.
Maybe Dead Space. Was it Dead Space that
I
was?
didn't buy that one brand new, but I did buy it. So we'll say Dead Space. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
add that in. That's already 5 off the top of my head, and I bought a lot of indie games. I bought way more than 14. I can tell you that. Um, Whereas traditional gamers buy 5 AA and 5 AAA titles, which makes sense. These are the guys who buy basically every major game that comes out, like the flavor of the month game. They buy it, right? Because that's 10
Hmm.
titles, so that's almost a game a month, right? So these guys are like in it. Like the same dude
Yeah.
who he bought the same games I bought plus everything else that came out. So he also bought Diablo 4. He also bought Wars of the Fallen. He also bought Call of Duty. He also bought NBA, right? And so they also talk about, but why don't traditional gamers buy indie games? And they view them as basically lower quality, right? And they like to play the big franchises. Then they talk about the hours. If you go further up, mm, regular indie buyers are the most active players of the three groups, with an average play time of 18.3 hours per week, followed by the light indie game players or buyers, 14.9, and then traditional guys are 12.3. So these guys they buy less and they play less, but they have higher expectations of what they want the games to be. Whereas guys like me, we buy way more, right? Because even though I'm buying the games I'm buying are cheaper, when you add it all up, I'm spending more than this person, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm playing them more according to this, which I think there's truth to that, because I think there's just more. There's more to play in those kinds of games, whereas a Spider-Man 2, for example, like once you beat that game, you're done. There's no real replayability. I mean, you can replay the game, but like when compared to like some indie titles that give you a real reason to replay the game, I think there's a big difference. Um, so that was pretty interesting to me. And then when you take that in conjunction with the stuff you were talking about, where was it? No, it was further up. I lost it. I had a whole thing set up. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. Um, Humble Games also found that the ideal set of features an indie title should have, including the original IP, creative risk, single player over multiplayer, 20 to 100 hours total playtime, and more. The full list can be seen on the slide below. Um, that's another thing too. Like, I definitely prefer single player over multiplayer. If a game has multiplayer, it's cool. I don't. That's not like a selling point for me. And then if a game has at least 20 hours, it's like, okay, that's definitely it. Whereas these guys, traditional game buyers, if you scroll further down to like the preferences as to why they like these games, or you scroll up actually, it's graphics. So if the chart with the red and blue bars, this one was really interesting. Where, where's where's the graphics one? Yeah, graphics for the red represents the traditional buyers. So that the 48% of the people they surveyed, almost half, said graphics was the reason why they like buy these games. Graphics slash art, to be fair. And then 37% of the indie buyers said they buy games for graphics. And then if you look at story and narrative, it's pretty even, 59% versus 58%. And then the other discrepancy is innovation and uniqueness. So indie game buyers look for more innovation and uniqueness versus traditional buyers at 28%. So these guys are like more about the graphics, the pizzazz of the
story,
game,
yeah.
like the cinematic experience, which we talked about in other podcast topics in the past. That's what they're looking for, and that's the difference. Like, I'm a gameplay guy. They're story cinematic, and yeah, we're just on opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean that is pretty interesting. I figured story and narrative would be a lot lower for the indie game because I'll speak for myself. If I'm playing like a Metroidvania, obviously I kind of want to know why I'm doing. Like, what's the Hollow Knight doing in Hollow? Like, why is he doing what he does? But like, I guess maybe when it comes to Metroidvanias for me, it's the Metroidvania. Like, are the power-ups cool? Are the collectible weapons cool? Is the map well designed? Are the bosses fun to fight against?
Yeah, but they
The
also mentioned that
story,
indie buyers,
yeah,
most of them play RPGs. So a lot of
And
RPGs are more story
yeah,
driven.
that's
So
true.
that would make sense as to why that would be a
That's
driving point.
that's what I was gonna chime in. Like, typically, since there's two genres that are leading the masses when it comes to indie titles, and that's Metroidvania and RPGs, and both consist of some type of like story narrative dynamic. Um, with Metroidvanias, it's not so like prominent. It's not really like as deep as RPGs, but it's there. And those are the two genres from what I see that are leading the charge in the indie title like games.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing
Yeah,
I want to mention too
definitely.
is this last part about the pricing. is actually inaccurate for me. So so for me the price boundary is $40. So for me, if anything is like $40 or less, it's like not a guaranteed buy, but like it's like okay, if I really like what I see, $40 is like great. Like I feel like that's such a fair price. Um, because growing up, during the PlayStation One era, I remember most games being like in that price range. Like the cheap kind of like whatever stuff was like 10, $15. The decent stuff was like 20 to 30. The better stuff was 40 to 50. So 40 always felt like a fair price point. So when I see indie games dropping at 40, some people might see that as like that's a little much for a Mega Man style game. But for me, it's like, no, that's perfect. Like 40 is just such a nice round number. It's also the price point of like DS and 3DS games back in the day. Like those that's the
Bro,
price
yeah.
that those games launched at. And to me, that quality is like very, it's parallel. Like when I see indie games, I see like if you think of indie games, and you look at games like Shovel Knight and Shantae on 3DS, there's a lot of parallels there. It's like, yeah, this feels right. 40 feels right for this kind of experience.
It's
And when I see stuff at 25, it's almost like an automatic buy. Or even in the $5 point is a big point. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, Esoteric. But that $5 point is huge because when we went to VGNY just last week, I bought two indie games and both were 35. And for me, I expected them to be $39.99 and they were 35, 34.99. I was like, ooh, that's a steal. Like I remember thinking that. And I was like, yeah, give me those. Like so that $5 difference is there, but for me the boundary's a little higher. It's 40.
Okay, so you're all right. So yeah, your thresholds. Okay, interesting. That's a good comparison between the 3DS because yeah, a lot of bangers were $40.
Yeah, they're now $100. So anyway,
Don't I know it,
yeah.
man?
no.
What are you gonna say, Esoteric?
I was just
My
gonna.
bad.
No, I was just gonna say, pertaining to your correlation with like the price point of like $40 and like equating the indie titles to like 3DS titles and stuff like that. That's probably why it's not so much related to like this article here, but it's probably why I subconsciously prefer all my games indie wise to be on like the Switch or the Steam Deck because they give me that feel of like what handheld games should
Mhm.
be and should feel like.
I agree with
Um,
that.
That's why a lot of my RPGs, indie or otherwise, if I can help it, tend to be on the Switch because I'm taken back to like the 3DS days. For me, 3DS is my favorite system ever. Right? PS2 is a banger. I ain't gonna mess with that guy. He's got it going on. But for me, 3DS was like RPG heaven. And it, the fact that I could just play it in my bed or on the train, that's why I prefer the Switch and probably a Steam Deck whenever
yeah.
I get around to getting one. It's just I feel like RPGs belong there. So
Absolutely, grinding on the go. Like that's why I prefer like Monster Hunter as well on like a portable device because while I'm mining for like certain things, I can do that without having to sit in front of the TV all day. I can just move around and be mobile and still be at the level that I need to be by the time we all come together and whatnot. Um,
yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, I don't even really play video games outside anymore because it ain't 2002 anymore.
well,
a
yeah.
little, just a little wild nowadays. But like that, the feeling didn't go away. It's just
Mhm.
like even though my computer is literally 2 steps away from my bed, most of the time I want it on I want it on my Switch because I could just chill out and play it and I don't have to set up my PlayStation. I don't have to turn it on. I don't have to. Nah. When I'm done playing, press the power button, put it on sleep mode, just like the 3DS. I just close the shell. I'm done for the evening. So
Yeah, and I can multitask. So while I'm hanging out with the missus, because you guys already know my setup, I'm subjected to this room with where all my systems
true.
are.
Yep.
So I can just take my Steam Deck or my Switch and go hang out with the missus, converse with her a bit while playing whatever game is on there. And predominantly it's indie titles for me on the Steam Deck. Um, but also going back to the article, I do agree with like the whole price point of a certain like game being low, because I have a tendency to like, depending upon the title of the game and for the price point to be so low, I'm thinking subconsciously like, what is wrong with this game? Why is it so low? What's making it so bad? Um, and I do agree with that to some degree, because there has been like, I know, Gunna, you mentioned buying Hollow Knight for $30. When I came into Hollow Knight pretty late, and I got it for like around $10, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't understand why it's $10, but it is an indie title. And I think during the time that Hollow Knight did come out, or like later in the time where I was paying attention to Hollow Knight, that's when I started like really paying attention to indie titles, because I didn't know too much about like what's a good price point for them. I just know that they had gameplay that I would like to dive deep into. Um, but with that price point, I did think like, yeah, there might be something wrong or whatnot, because having that AAA title way of thinking, because back in the days, AAA titles were actually good, or what would have been considered AAA titles for the time that like the PS2 and 3 was coming out. Those games did offer a significant amount of gameplay as opposed to the current games that are coming out now. So if they were priced at like what, $60. So depending upon when they launched, if they went down significantly to like 40 or $30, I would assume that something is wrong with it. So
Okay, I gotcha.
I can see what they meant in terms of like it being $10. There, people are a little more like apprehensive to acquiring it.
Yeah, because for me sometimes it's like I have to kind of retrain my brain from like the AAA space, where if a game is coming to you and it's like, all right, our game is $15, it might
Mhm.
not mean that the game itself is lower quality or bad or doesn't have as much thought put into it as a $35 indie. It could be that like the team, or in some cases, the guy, the sole person who developed the game says, you know what? My game is a grand total of maybe 5 hours of game or 10 hours of gameplay
Yeah,
or a low number. So I'm not going to charge them $30. My game is a $15 or $20 game. That is how much my game is worth. And I can respect somebody who prices a game like that, because they're not out here saying, no, my game's a $65 game and, you know, it's a game that consists of 10 stages and you're done.
yeah,
So, yeah, but that, that's something that you got to like, you can only get so much from looking at the box art. Sometimes you have to kind of research that and figure that out. But it's hard to train yourself out of, oh, this game's only $15, $20. Oh, it's got to be an asset flip, which is the case sometimes. I'm not gonna say that doesn't happen, but sometimes you get some high quality indie games for 15, $20. So it's just you gotta like untrain your brain from the big AAA boys that kind of said, if it's not $65 and it doesn't look like a gorgeous moving painting, it's trash. Ignore it.
oh well, yeah, absolutely. One thing that indie games are able to do is market what the game is about, because like with triple or quadruple A games, you don't know what you're getting just based off a trailer, and their trailer consists of is just cinematics. At least with indie titles, you're getting like actual gameplay and maybe a couple of stills of whatever cinematic story they're trying to convey in the game. So it's a lot easier to know what's in the contents of the bag you're carrying when it comes to indie titles versus AAA titles.
Yeah, and they have to be a lot more honest, because they can't really get away with trying to, sugarcoat gameplay, because they got what they got. So
Yeah,
your only path is to be honest and put your best foot forward. If you're like a small time indie developer, you can't afford to be dishonest.
yeah, true.
Yeah, another interesting thing at the bottom of the article is how, and they don't do this when indie and traditional gamers prefer. So they don't do this for the traditional gamers, I guess. They only did it for the indie buyers, which is weird, but okay. So these stats are just for indie gamers. So the guys in like the turquoise column, which is basically all. 31% of indie gamers find out about games on YouTube, followed by Steam 15%, and friends and family at 13%. That sounds pretty. That feels right.
Yeah.
54% of them pay attention to gameplay videos, which is definitely, while also looking at in-story gameplay screenshots 28% and official trailers 27%. When it comes to things that trigger the purchase, gameplay videos motivate 30% of the respondents, followed by a sale or discount 12%, and player reviews at 10%. There have been multiple nights where me and Gunnar, or me and Zeta, or me and you, Esoteric, are on Discord, we're chatting, and I would share my screen, and I'm just shopping online. Like, I'm just looking at indie games on Amazon or GameStop or something like that. And I'll just, like, look at stuff that's coming out, and I would just look at the cover, look at the screenshots, and then that'll be enough to kind of bait interest. And then I would be like, yeah, let me look at some gameplay footage.
Yeah.
And I'll open a new tab. I'll just type in the name of the game, gameplay, and then I will look at, like, literally a minute of gameplay, and then that would determine whether or not I'm interested in buying it. That's literally all it takes. And it goes back to what you were saying about honesty. A lot of these games are honest. They're just like, we're just going to show you the game, and we're just going to let the gameplay speak for itself, and then you decide if you want to buy it or not. And more often than not, you know, I end up picking up those games. Even if I don't play them right away, I'll pick them up just to have them there and know, yep, before we recorded, I told Esoteric I picked up 2 indie games the other day, and Gunnar was there with me. Behold Gar and Mayhem Brawler for Switch. Beat 'em up game.
Oh, nice! I picked up.
You got that too?
No, I picked up a Panzer Paladin.
Oh, I'm trying to find that for cheap. See, this article also called me cheap, which is true.
I got it for $35. So
look at that, these indie gamers, man. You got to be more traditional. Just
we're,
here's my $70, sir.
we're like flea market gamers.
I think I could do that. But another interesting thing is like this other chart in the center of like what indie gamers look for, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. So ideal indie features overview: so story, narrative, original IP, deep storytelling, non-linear or environmental storytelling, which is definitely true. Graphics and audio, graphics/art audio, stylized art, bright colors, 2D or 3D is okay. Looks hand-drawn if 2D, definitely true. I prefer hand-drawn sprites as opposed to 3D model when it comes to 2D games. Music and soundtrack, definitely. If you got a banging soundtrack, it takes your game from good to amazing. Innovation and uniqueness, feels like designers took a risk. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't really. Sometimes playing it safe is okay.
Yeah, for me it doesn't always have to be, but when you compare to some AAA games, anything different might as well be considered a huge risk with how cookie cutter some of these games are nowadays.
Well, my thing is, how much risk are indie games taking when they just follow the typical protocol? They just take, okay, so because again, as I stated, for the most part in indie games, the biggest genres are RPGs and Metroidvanias. Like, I find it really difficult for you to be able to mess up a Metroidvania at this point. Like, if you pay attention to what the mechanics are, you can just add you got the blueprint. You could just add the different components that you want to add for
There's
fluff
a lot of sources
and whatnot.
It really is.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's so much of innovation. I think that, they're just taking an existing wheel and just kind of like making it their own.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's not so. Yeah, it's not so much. I would say the AAA titles are trying to be a little more. Well, I can't even really say that.
Really? Okay, I was about. Are you gonna finish that sentence?
I can't even say that honestly.
Because I can't tell you how many open world samey games seen or played.
Yeah, but you say that, but
yeah,
like,
I can't.
There's something we had this discussion a few months ago with Zeta, where he was saying that like a lot of indie games occupy the same space. Like, it feels very samey.
Yeah.
And I gave him pushback.
That was
on
awesome.
That.
Yeah.
I remember that conversation. I was like, nah, these games are like pretty different. It's just, and I still kind of feel that way. It's just, it feels like, I don't know, like think of like a cold sandwich. Like there's ham, there's turkey, there's pastrami, there's roast beef. Like, and then there's like combinations. You could do ham and turkey, and then so like for me, it's like each sandwich is the sandwich. It's just a different kind of sandwich, right? And so I look at Metrovania games the same way. It's like there's Hollow Knight. That's a ham sandwich, and then there's like what was Ender Lilies, the game that I got recently that Esoteric stream. Yeah, that's a turkey sandwich, right? They're both sandwiches. They're both great. They're just different sandwiches. I don't know. That's
kind of how I see it.
So that's my perspective. I don't know. Some people might think that's dumb, but I feel like that's the easiest.
I mean, I don't care. I don't care as long as it plays, as long as it's not full of fluff, i.e., cinematics and things like that. Like I can appreciate a good cinematic, but lately, when it comes to these AAA titles, which I feel as though I kind of sway from them in my like personal time. They mass gameplay within their cinematics, so it's really hard to define what these current games are.
That's definitely true. We watched some of the not too long ago. We watched some of like the PlayStation Direct stuff and Nintendo stuff.
Yeah,
dude, like there were games that they were showcasing. I was like, I don't know what is a game or what it's not. Like I don't know what the game is. Like I get it. I just because it could be because a lot of the cinematics that they cut is in-game engine. Like they use the in-game engine to like create the scene, but it's just like what you're looking at. But like we know what a video game looks like in action. So it's like where's the health bar? Where's the like where would these like how does this work? It's like the other game we were looking at. Blade Zero.
Phantom Blade Zero. Yeah, Phantom Blade Zero.
I kept calling that game fake gameplay because it's like I don't see how this is like real gameplay. Like it just feels too cinematic.
It's a huge.
The jury's still out on that game, right? Like we don't know when that's coming out.
It's just a huge problem when your biggest asset is not being shown, at least from a consumer perspective. Because from my perspective, I want to play a game, and it's a big problem for trailers to come out on the biggest stage of them all, the Game Awards, and every caveat to each trailer is, this is not gameplay. This is not gameplay. Then what the hell am I watching? I'm here to.
You're watching in-game footage, so the game will kind of look like this.
Watching the hype,
maybe.
Get enveloped in the hype.
It's like, if you want to take that route, go work for the MCU or go like be in Hollywood. I'm here to have that interactive experience in terms of being able to utilize my controller as much as possible, not to watch this entire thing play out and I didn't even touch but 2 buttons.
Like funny you mentioned that, because in the same state of play that me and Kong were watching for previous video, make sure to tune in for that one, people. They show we watched a video on Stellar Blade. Now, for those who know Stellar Blade, it's the talk of the internet, good or bad. And I looked at him like, all right, it looks cool. I might look into it. But when I saw like the actual breakdown, I was like, wow, this game is a little bit more deep than I thought. I really thought it was like an action game, kind of like in the shape of like Nier, or Devil May Cry, where it's all flashy combos and good-looking characters, and that was kind of it, which I'm not opposed to, but it's not something that I'm gonna rush out and buy. But after seeing like the kind of like the overview trailer and showing that there were different like upgrade mechanics and open world segments and fishing, how fishing and resource management and crafting, I was like, oh wow, okay, this game's a little bit more deep than I gave it credit for, and it kind of piqued my personal interest in getting the game. So now for me, the game's graduated to like, I'll get it eventually, to I'll probably buy it. I'll probably buy it day one.
Yeah, I initially thought it was a hack and slash when we first saw it.
It kind of is.
Kong called it. Kong was like, yeah, this is going to be good. I think this is going to be interesting. I was like, yeah, the jury's still out on that for me. But if it has all of those components within it, that would definitely be a must buy.
The trailer, you can see for yourself. We'll watch it together because I don't mind watching it. It's a pretty good trailer. But just to wrap up the point I was making with this, I have 2 more points, and then we can wrap up from there. Back to the other chart, where they talk about like what the ideal features in a indie game gamers look for. We were looking at innovation and uniqueness, showcases new and unique gameplay and styles and mechanics. That's partially true. I'm okay with old mechanics, but new mechanics are always nice to see. Creative creative expression focused on personal satisfaction over community shareability. That's definitely true. Like
Yeah.
having it be this intimate experience with me in the game is way more important than a leaderboard or something like that. Includes rich character customization. I know that's a big one for Gunner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allows players to
That immediately gets me interested in your
especially
indie
if there's
game.
like
If
a
like your
fashion system or something.
yeah, or like even so much like, oh, your sword looks different in a game about sprites. You didn't have to do that. Oh shit.
Which goes back to the whole looks hand drawn if 2D. That's a big thing. Allows players to develop a unique playstyle. That's definitely a big one.
Yes,
Heavy.
heavy.
That's kind of what made me and Gunnar interested in Stellar Blade, because it wasn't just you hack and slash with the pretty girl. You hack and slash, but like, how do you want to hack and slash? Like, there's like layers to it, which is like appreciated. Controls and modes, third person perspective. I definitely prefer a third person perspective versus a first person one. A slower pace that allows time to plan moves ahead or plan moves out. That's true. I do.
Depends on the game.
It does.
Depends
but
on the game for me.
Like heavier games with like weight and a little more methodical gameplay than something that's like super like Marvel versus Capcom fast. It's like I don't need everything to be single player over multiplayer. Definitely true. Online co-op over multiplayer. That's definitely true. I love me some online co-op. Amount of content, a vast world to explore. That kind of depends. Designed for long play sessions, 20 to 100 hours total play time. So I agree with most of this, not all of it, but a good amount of it I do agree with. And another thing I wanted to mention, going back to the chart with the blue and red bars, you mentioned that you were kind of surprised that the story and narrative was so close between indie gamers and traditional gamers, or indie buyers and traditional
That's
buyers.
all you get for traditional gamers.
Which makes sense for traditional, but you know what? I would have agreed with you, but thinking about it more, for a long time, I would say I'm not a story guy, which is true for the most part, but not really. And the game that made me realize that that's not necessarily true for me is Armored Core 6. I typically don't get invested into story, and the Souls games in general. I don't care about the story, typically, because if I'm being honest, most stories suck. Most of the stories in video games are poorly, in my opinion, poorly written. I can't get into it. I can't get involved into it. It's usually shallow. It's usually cookie cutter. It's usually not interesting, or it's preachy. There's a lot of games that are preachy about their message, right? And so it turns me off. I'm like, no, I could just turn my brain off and just play the fucking right. But if if character/story is really well written and well executed, whether it be voice logs or just data logs that you read, I can really sink my teeth into something like that. So Armored Core 6 is a clear example of a game that like the story isn't in your face, but like once you start digging, it gets really intriguing, and like you start to
That's why I like the
really
Souls.
appreciate the characters and the world building. Same for the Souls games, right? Even before there were like YouTube lore videos, I remember being so intrigued, like, man, why is this here? Why does this character do this? What's his motivation here? Like, I would ask these questions, and the game gave me enough to kind of pull me in instead of shoving it in my face, which is what a lot of games try to do. So I don't know.
Yeah, some games will try to lore dump on you, like, here's all this info.
Yeah, and I'm like,
go, and it's like, I could read a book for that.
But the thing is, they also do that by cinematics. I think what was well executed on Armored Core's part was the fact that most of the dialogue pertaining to the story was done while you were playing. Like most of the story was like the discussions. They were through discussions. They were during battles. The Souls games is the same thing, and it was optional if you wanted to dive deep based upon which type of like items you acquired, because each item had its own like dialogue about it, like information pertaining to it, and it was really deep. Whereas the usual way is, okay, I'm fighting this boss. Here comes big cutscene. Next stage, big cutscene. Oh, okay, here's what my characters are gonna do, and this, that, a third. So which I personally don't mind that because I'm very driven by story. Like, I understand that it's a game first, but I do like to know why the mission is a mission. That's why back in the days when I used to buy games, I used to take out the manuals and read what each character, what's their backstory, what are they doing. I used to read the back and get a summary of like what's going on because I enjoy that, and knowing why they're doing certain things is like, I guess it's like of vital importance to me almost as much as the gameplay.
See, and I fought you on that a lot in the past. Well, not fought you, but like I would be like, I don't agree, right? And
Yeah.
to some degree, I still hold that position. But like
Hmm.
over the years, I've realized that it's not necessarily that I'm not necessarily a story guy. It's not a lot of stories of that. That's really what it is.
Yes.
And this
Yes.
graph kind of like I would have disagreed with. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with it. It's hard data, but like I would have disagreed with it in the sense that like I don't really fall in that 58%, but I kind of do.
Yeah.
Because if the story's really good, that's just like with music I mentioned earlier. A good story can take a good game and make it fucking amazing. Right? It really
Yeah.
it does amplify everything. And
Yeah.
so that was like the main point that I wanted to bring up. Same with like, you know, I've had discussions with people about Ghost of Tsushima, on how that game is not
Beautiful story.
how
Oh
that
my
game is not
god.
that great because it doesn't really do anything new per se. And I go, that's
Yeah.
true.
That's a good
That's
point.
true.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of
Yeah.
the design decisions were pretty like cookie cutter, like the world map and like the side quests and stuff. That's true.
Invade the Hun base, number
Yeah.
503.
That's true. It's a lot of filler content. It's like, you look at from just you strip away all the themes and you look at that in Spider-Man. It's like, you know, it's there's
And
a lot
Horizon,
and Horizon
yeah.
and games like that. There's a lot of overlap with as far as like how it's
Yeah.
designed. But
Mhm.
the difference with Ghost and some of those other games is I personally, this, in my opinion, the story and the way it was delivered was fucking like the oh man.
And not just the story, the authenticity of the dialogue between the characters. They were all Japanese, whether it was English or like done in
It felt
you
like
know
it fit, definitely, and not in the
yeah.
sense that some people might hear you say that and go, "Oh, because it's a diversity thing." No, it felt like
Oh no
it
no no no
fit.
no
It
no, yeah,
wasn't
yeah, yeah.
forced. It wasn't
Yeah.
shoehorned. It felt like, nah,
Yeah.
this feels
Yeah.
right. And a lot of other games, they don't feel right, and they didn't make me feel anything. Whereas Ghost of
Yeah.
Tsushima at the end, where I had to fight my uncle and I had to choose whether to kill him or not, that one of the few times I had to put my controller down and really think about what I wanted to do. And the only other game,
You guys watch me do
and
that.
I got to see you do that live. The only other game to make me do that recently was Armor Core, where you had to choose whether you were going to betray Carla or not. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is a huge decision. And a lot of games don't make me do that. So,
And the crazy thing about Armor Core, which still floors me, is that you know how you have no idea how any of these people look. They're
To
all
this day.
they're all voice. It's all done with
Mhm.
voice. And I hope Bandai and From Software never actually, like, if they release an art book, don't, like, just leave them ambiguous, because I love having my idea of how Walter looks, how Rusty looks, how Carla looks, and it'll never live up to my imagination. So but and the point is, for a game to invoke that much emotion and for me to give a shit about characters that you never actually see in the game, that's a combination of well-written characters and well-voiced characters.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also to your point, Gunnar, like about like the ambiguity pertaining to the characters, we can have a discussion about what we think each of these
Yeah,
characters look
your
like.
Rusty is different from my Rusty, is different from Kong's Rusty. Like
Yeah.
we
To
all have a
this
like.
day, I look stuff up about Armor Core lore, and I just learned about Rusty's emblem changing after he.
Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" And then the lyrics of the song kick up when he's, part of the liberation, because now he's free, he's
Yeah.
unmuzzled. I was like, that's so like the meta. I was
Yeah,
like,
and the vocals
oh,
come in because
like,
now he can. Yeah.
mind you, this game came out almost a year ago, and I haven't played it in months, and I'm like, this game is fucking like so cool. Like it's
Yeah.
so cool, right? And this is stuff that they could have easily shoved in your. Most other games would have shoved it in your face, like, look how clever we are, right? And it would have been whatever, but the fact that they didn't do that, and it was so subtle, makes me appreciate it even more.
Yeah, just trusting your audience to not be like just too many games treat their audience like they're stupid, and it's just like you're too dumb. So we're gonna show you the vision.
But you know what?
We're gonna show you our
To
vision for
be
this
fair,
game.
though, and I'm not gonna. This is gonna sound fucked up, but it's partially true. There's so many like people who need that extra handheld or extra like hand holding style of design that they've kind of become the majority, and now they've kind of dictated the market. We're a part of the minority now, so we just kind of have to learn to deal with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially considering that the majority now cares about the cinematics, so which comes with the cinematics would have to come like a decent story for them to actually understand and be able to follow along. Because let's just face it, like gameplay is of second importance when it comes to these AAA
Somehow,
titles and
which
whatnot.
is
I mean,
madness.
there's some exceptions to the rule. However, like everybody, for people to get hyped for something that says and let me fix that. For people to get excited for a new IP that only shows them trailers, it's mind-boggling. Trailers of like just cinematics and whatnot, no gameplay whatsoever.
Yeah,
It's just
'cause
crazy.
it's like you guys. It's the hype. It's the like get hype. This is the new hype thing. It's so superficial, and like a lot of these games will not live up to the hype that was generated once they come out. But once they come out, they got you $70. I don't care anymore. I'm
Yeah,
out.
Yeah,
And those games will never last the test of time. So
true that. Well, guys, thank you for a great conversation. This was fun. Thank you, Gunnar, for providing the article. I think that was a pretty interesting.
yeah, no problem. This
indeed.
website, Game World Observer,
Yeah, I
like
like them.
it's really
I do.
yeah.
I do
them a lot.
too.
I think I found my new like main site to go for general gaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where I go for content.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Cool. So for those listening, thank you for staying with us for this long. Appreciate your time and viewership. If you enjoyed the video, give us a like or a dislike. Comment down below. Let us know what you think. Where do you fall in that spectrum of gamers? Are you an indie gamer? Are you a light indie gamer? Traditional gamer where you only play AAA and AA games? We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more content. We do podcasts every single week, 12 p.m. Eastern. We also do other content as well, like unboxing videos and gameplay videos. So check that content out as well. The article that we reference will be in the description, so you can check that out and read it for yourself. And I'd recommend reading along, during the conversation, so you can follow along, or not, whatever is easier for you. Check out our socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We have a Discord as well as a Twitch. Mr. Esoteric streams on Twitch 2 to 3 times a week. He streams a variety of games, so definitely give him a follow, check him out, so you're notified when he goes live. That being said, catch you next one.
Take
Nice.
care.